Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, please. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, please. Hello and welcome to everyone. My name is Thomas Griffin. I'll be kind of the kickoff guy. I'm not your host nor your MC. I'm just an older gentleman that likes to talk a lot. And they've allowed me the opportunity to do so. For those of you that don't know, today is Juneteenth. Now, if I'm not mistaken and I'm utilizing my memory skills, we've been here this is the third time we've been here in landmarks to celebrate Juneteenth. The first time we made it a party. The second time we kind of brought it down and gave you some blues and some old school jazz. Well, today we're going to engage you all with a little bit of dialogue. And we're going to talk about some of the things that make the Black community different than some of the other communities. And the key word today is resilience. Think about this. Of all the cultures that are here in America, there's one group of people that kind of came here unwillingly. Once they got here, they lost all of their heritage, background, culture. But through all of that, they have been resilient enough to buy into the. They have been resilient enough to buy into the American dream and prosper and overcome regardless of the circumstances. So today we're going to talk about resilience. But before I get into resilience, I'm going to put my glasses on because I am over 21 and sometimes you need to read. Because we're talking about resilience today, we want everybody to be aware that we have these types of events do not happen without financial aid, financial assistance, and sponsorships. So we want to talk about our sponsors real quick, and then I'm going to start talking fast so I can get out of the way to let the smart people come up and give you some knowledge. First of all, we want to acknowledge Lilly Endowment, the National Trust, and one of my favorite people in the world, I say this all the time, Mr. Robin Winston and Charlita Winston. Because what we're doing today is right here at Landmarks, they have an organization called the Black Heritage Preservation Program, headed by my girlfriend, friend girl, smartest woman in the world, Eunice Trotter. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, what we want to do is start our program. And so, in church, they want to start it off with a prayer. We're going to start ours off with a little spoken word. So, our young lady that we like to bring to the stage, and I don't know if she's coming here, or does she have a microphone? She's going to have a microphone out front. Okay. I don't even know her last name, but her first name is so fantastic, it doesn't even matter. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please put your hands together for an artist extraordinaire. Her name is Miracle.
Hi. I hope you guys are doing well today. Happy Juneteenth. Give it up for freedom. Clock it. Hey. I was asked to do some poetry, and I'm so grateful to be here today. I'm going to try to stay as politically correct as possible because a lot of my poetry is a little urban, as you can. So I tried hard to write some poetry that would fit the theme and not use as many curse words. So this one is called Take All That SHIT Off. Okay? Take off all the damn anklets and burn those head wraps too. I'm done with the aesthetics and the lies they dressed as truth. I was holy with no altar. I was magic with no spell. I was priceless with no diamonds. Still the truth you fear to tell. I was legend with no scriptures, and I was war without the blade. Took the fire that meant to burn me and lit the torches that led the way. I was sacred with no temple, held the sun inside my chest, carved my name into the cosmos and made the heavens spell it best. I was gold before the market, and I was rare before the mines. And every chain they tried to give me only taught me to refine. See, I was power with no master, and I was free before the fight. And I took the weight they tried to hand me and made a throne and took my right. So I ain't bowing, I ain't begging, I ain't built to play it small. I'm the force they couldn't shackle. I'm the rise they feared to fall. I ain't asking for permission. I ain't waiting for a seat. I built the table, I cooked the dinner, and I fed the ones that tried to cheat. See, they told me to hush and I sang louder. Told me to sit and I'm gonna run. Told me to break and I built a kingdom. Now they call me the chosen one. I ain't a relic. I ain't a martyr. I ain't built for their display. I'm the force they swore would vanish, yet I'm standing here today. Yes. Thank you. I'm so excited to write. I'm so excited to write more non-vulgar poetry. Like, I think I'm good at that. So yeah. Okay. Here's another one. I'm only gonna do 2.5 maybe and get out y'all's hair, okay? But this is a call and response one, okay? So when I say it loud, I don't care who you are, I don't care what you look like. When I say it loud, you say, okay, everybody, join in, it's Juneteenth. We're unified. Say it loud. Amen. See, I'm black like spades on a Friday night. You know, talking stuff, counting books under the dim porch light. I'm black like that hot comb sizzle, like sit still and don't you wiggle. I'm black like thick thighs, brown eyes, full lips, stacked hips. I'm black like grandmother's peppermints, long talks, deep prayers. Black like satin bonnets and fresh pressed hair. I'm black. Say it loud. Yeah, I'm black, like bobos and clear beads clacking and clicking, like Kool-Aid stains and double Dutch kicking. I'm black, like who all over there? I'm black, like let me hold a plate. With zero shame to spare, I'm black like Sunday shoes and white socks folded, like secrets told low and memories golden. I'm black and I'm proud, like resilience that don't make no sense, like stretch marks from carrying generations past tense. I'm black like, nah, I got it. I'm black like, we gonna be all right. I'm black like we shine even out of spite. I'm black like street lights flicker. Hurry home quick. Black like that toy gun that turned into a news clip. Black like chalk lines drawn on hopscotch squares. Black like grief stuffed under white folding chairs. Say it loud. Say it louder. There we go. That's that piece. All right. This is my last one. Again, my name is Miracle. Um, if you try to reach me on social media, listen, I don't know who you're gonna see. I don't know what you're gonna get. Might be a little this, it might be a little that. So if you ever want to book me, just look me up by Miracle Hall. Nothing else. Okay? All right. If I stop posting, this is what this one is called. And this is really about like social media and the clicks and the likes, and a lot of my information has been entertaining, because in my generation, like, you know, we ain't in the Nina Simone era anymore. Okay, kind of gotta look like Meg Thee Stallion to get any type of views or any type of information out there for my generation to to get the message, you know. So I kind of wrote this poem out of frustration because you have to look a certain way to get a certain message out these days. And we have a lot of lost knowledge because of that. So if I stop posting, if I stop posting about twerking, about working a man's nerve, is it really worth it to lose the eyes that I can blind in the back of their minds with the truth? They scroll past pain but double tap illusions, a system built on silent intrusion. See, if I ain't shaking, gyrating, am I still in their view, face down, sitting up? Will they listen to the truth? Would they see that I've been advocating for the babies and for the ladies who be dying while they waiting in the rooms where it's the safest? Hospitals turn prison cells and bedrooms turn war zones. Crib sheets soaked in hormones. White coats turn their backs. They don't see us. Tell us hush. Say we tough. We don't need much. But the pain's still real and the wounds don't heal. They prescribe more pills trying to break our will. Babies born into trauma. Mamas breathing through the drama, tears falling like a comma, no relief, just more karma. They tell us push, but we don't listen. We statistics, another black name on a list they won't mention. Algorithm got me choosing. Do I free minds or keep them amused in a cycle where clicks mean more than calls, where knowledge get lost if I don't get applause? But I ain't here for the cheap validation. I'm not here for the thirst traps and the weak admiration. I've been screaming for the babies, for the mamas in despair, for the bodies left breathless in a world full of air. So if they only see me when I move like they won't, then maybe I'm a ghost when I give them what they don't. But even in silence, I know my worth, because the real gonna listen when I rock this earth. That's that piece. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and get out y'all's hair. I appreciate you guys. I love being in a room full of elders and wise people in season, all this seasoning. I feel like a soul food platter is here. But I appreciate you guys for having me. Eunice, I don't know where she is, but thank you guys so much. And again, my name is Miracle Hall. I'm a health and wellness advocate, plant-based. If you're young, you can find me at Holistic Hoochies. Uh, and we can probably relate there. We talk about herbs, we talk about life with a little bit of twerking in it, but we have a good time, and I'm just trying to elevate, and trying to just bring my people back, man. I don't know. But thank you. Thank you, Ms. Hall. Ms. Hall, now for holistic, is that with a WH? With an H, you all. Okay. With another H. H squared. Okay, girl, we got you. All right. Good evening, everyone. The hour has come for Dr. Lasana Kazembe to join the stage. He is an assistant professor in the IU School of Education, Department of Urban Teacher Education, and in the Africana Studies program at IU Indianapolis. He is a published poet, spoken word artist, educational consultant, and scholar of urban teacher education, global Black arts movement, and the Black radical tradition in education. Dr. Kazembe's inquiry and practice involves deep exploration, leveraging of culturally sustaining pedagogy, reflective teaching, liberatory education, and social, racial, cultural justice. He has been awarded the Indiana University Trustees Teacher Award, the Chancellor's Award for Excellence in Multicultural Teaching, and the Burton W. Gorman Teaching Award. His research interest intersects culturally sustaining pedagogy, the arts and the arts pedagogy, and social and racial justice in education. Through teaching, research, and community service, his work challenges and disrupts. That's a powerful word, you all. And disrupts inequity and centers the transformative role
of Culture in Urban Education and the Arts. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Lasana Kazembe.
All right. Good evening, family. Oh, you can do better than that. Good evening, family. All right. It's wonderful to be here with you. I really appreciate these opportunities to share, to create community, if you will, and then to look for ways to explore and hold up the symbiotic relationship between the past and the present. We come out of an African-centered ethos and an African-centered way of looking at the world and making meaning in the world. And in the African-centered context, we do not divide time into past, present, and future. We have a different cosmology. We infer and we insist that it's all one. It's one continuum. That events that happened 5,000 years ago occupy the same space and time and the consciousness as events that happened 5 minutes ago. And I'm always interested because I work in a teacher education program. So I'm working with people who I meet them when maybe they're 21, 22, know everything, and it's really interesting to engage with them because most people, and they're not unlike a lot of people, I think some of us just have a very kind of reductive view of history. And we use our history as a reference instead of a resource. And so that must be said because I want to make some connections today. And as the great Russian playwright Bertolt Brecht, we used to say, we want to look for causal connections. How does A connect to B and impact C, D, and E? And so these are ways of analyses that are immutable, they're borderless, they do not have any sort of time limit or shelf life, but we can have a relationship with the past that is as immediate as if it were happening in real time right here, if we were so inclined. So at the beginning, though, I wanted to recite this prayer. We call it the African prayer in the culture. I don't know who wrote it. You know, some of the best artwork has no name on it. So I don't know who wrote it, but it's been passed around at least since the 1950s, as far as I know. And we usually share it at formal gatherings, and it's for everybody. It's the African prayer. May Ra give you his radiance and his rays flood your eyes. May you renew your youth like the moon and your name last forever like the stars of heaven. May you be the vanguard and rear guard of the people. May their love for you increase and deepen daily. For those who sit here and those who are not here, but still work for the rescue and reconstruction of history and humanity, may you live a long and full life and go to the grave without grief. May you be vindicated by heaven and history and be given that which endures in the midst of that which is overthrown. May your children follow your example and instruction and live after you generation after generation. And may you finally, in peace, rise like Ra, cross the desert with him in peace. May you reach paradise without one witness against you. And may those who see you extend their arms to you and say in the ancient saying, welcome, come in peace, you awesomely righteous servant. All right. So yeah, I got limited time. So, even if we had enough time, we wouldn't have enough time. All right. I am a native son, proud native son of Chicago. I've been called, Let the church say amen. I've been called to Indianapolis to do my work, but make no mistake, I'm not a Hoosier, not a Hoosier. I'm from the South Side off the corner, Inglewood, 6301 South Union in the room off the kitchen. All right. So I'm here since 2017 doing my work. My work takes place in 3 zones or 3 constellations. The constellation of education, and that's a broad field. Urban teacher education, pedagogy, schooling, curriculum, all of that. It's all different, but it's all distinct and connected. The world of education, the world of Africana history and culture. I am a Black history hitman. All right, so I gotta come and I gotta keep a toehold in that world and connect those worlds of education and Africana history and culture. And also the third space that I represent, that I interrogate, that I explore, that I show up as a student and a teacher is the world of art and arts pedagogy. My work over the last 37 years has taken place in schools, communities, juvenile detention centers, and prisons. I'm a poet, a P-O-E-T, a purveyor of expression and truth. And I also work as a teaching artist in the highway and in the byway. So I love looking for the connections between those 3 worlds and how those things come to bear on how we live, how we teach, how we educate, how we learn, how we correct ourselves, and then how we most importantly introduce ourselves to history and humanity. The title of these brief remarks is called On Juneteenth, Black Resilience in Indiana. So happy Freedom Day, first of all. Watching the time here. Greetings to the event organizers, participants, and to the broader community of educators, culture workers, tradespeople, laborers, and everyone. I am happy to be in attendance and participation with you. I wish to thank you gigantically for the invitation to share with you these brief remarks. I offer these remarks with due deference, and honor to the ongoing tireless work of critical scholars and practitioners and sojourners in the centuries-long Black freedom struggle. Yo, that's a proper noun. As is my way, I seek to locate and situate my work alongside those all-season warrior scholars who have contributed to the righteous work of raising, of reaching, teaching, and preparing new generations to wage war against injustices and the new hydras of hegemony in whatever forms they may take. And I dedicate this brief talk to the legacy of the centuries-long Black freedom struggle, which has been ongoing in the Western Hemisphere since the mid-1500s. I'm speaking of a legacy of struggle against evil and the ongoing struggle to replace injustice with justice, which is one of our many cultural inheritances. The centuries-long Black freedom struggle has been and is the greatest liberation struggle ever waged in the history of humanity and continues to be the inspiration template for peoples throughout the world. I never will forget, I was watching, y'all remember Eyes on the Prize? Do you? I mean, we can say Eyes on the Prize, and I mean, you can agree that you've seen it. We're going to get in trouble with Governor Braun. Let's all get in trouble, right? I remember watching Eyes on the Prize, and there was an episode where they were dealing with a crackdown on Chinese people and the Chinese community, I believe, in New York City. And I remember, I never will forget the image of an elderly Chinese woman who had on what looked like a hospital robe or, like a gown they give you in the hospital. And the police were arresting her, and they had her in the back of the police wagon, and she refused to go in the door. And instead, she stood in the door. This elderly, looked like maybe 80 plus years old, Chinese woman raised her fist up and started singing, "We shall overcome." Whoa, right? That's a serious inspiration, a serious legacy. All right. Of course, out of that priceless legacy of the Black freedom struggle springs the Black radical tradition in education, okay? The arena in which I engage my work, and to engage the work means to transcend space and time, to engage the lives of forerunners and freedom seekers such as Carter G. Woodson, the Honorable Marva Collins and Anna Julia Cooper, Mari Evans and Mary McLeod Bethune, Benjamin Mays, the late great Amos Wilson, and of course the great forerunner Paul Robeson. So the context in which I'm speaking to you is a Twi word from the Akan people called Sankofa. Sankofa essentially means, translated, go back and fetch it, go back and return. So when you see the iconography, the symbology of the Sankofa bird, its feet planted in the presence, its head turned around, and what you can't see from this angle is the cosmic egg in the beak of the bird representing the future and the unborn generations that are to come. I come to you in the context of a great inheritance, a cultural, a spiritual inheritance that comes from our ancestors in the northeast corner of Africa, and it's a concept and practice we know as Sia. Can we say that? Some people scared to say it. Reverend Winterbourne, they scared to say it. What is it? Sia. Sia means exceptional insight. Exceptional insight. So we want to do like, I'm 55 years old, proud of it. So I grew up with the Thundercats. I remember Lion-O and the Sword of Omens. I want sight beyond sight, right? So we want to go into what we call African deep knowledge, thinking beneath the surface. That's Sia, exceptional insight. And of course, I'm going to go on over to the vanilla side of town, and I'm going to get some of the wisdom from one of the greatest educational scholars that ever lived, John Dewey, in 1920. He gave us this gift of this theory evaluation. What does that mean? That means that something can be appreciated in its time and across time. So, if you wired right, you can have a relationship with Maury Evans and Etheridge Knight and Freddie Hubbard and Dizzy Gillespie that's as immediate as them sitting right here. If you're wired right, if you got respect for intellect, and if you understand the symbiotic relationship between past, present, and future, we can have a relationship with them and actually apply and make meaning and really pull out new meanings in the world. I'm also coming to you out of a context we call psychohistory. All right, psychohistory, little Norman Bates. The study of the historical function of the changing meanings of things. That is very important because, like human beings, history is not static. We don't just exist like fruit in a Jell-O mold. We change, we evolve over time. The prophet Khalil Gibran, in his book, The Prophet Khalil Gibran, the poet, he said, even those who limp go not backward. Right? So we need to understand that we have to evolve and adapt, especially in this fascist moment we're in right now. I'm sure everyone would agree with that. I'm also coming out of a context of sharing the living wisdom of one of the greatest, perhaps the greatest Black intellectual that ever lived, the Honorable W.E.B. Du Bois, who wrote in The Souls of Black Folk, which you should read it and then you should reread it. You should read it and then you should reread it. All right? One ever feels his two-ness. An American, a Negro. Two souls, two thoughts, two unreconciled strivings, two warring ideals in one dark body whose strength alone keeps it from being torn asunder. This is what the great historian Alan Taylor means in his book, The Internal Enemy, when he talks about this stasis, this you're in it but not of it position that Black folk have been in for the last 5.5 centuries, right? And so what it does is it causes us to walk a psychological tightrope, right? Where you see you can avail yourself of certain areas of your citizenship, pay your taxes, conscript your sons and daughters for the armed forces, right? Do all of that. But when you go to reach for the other aspects of your citizenship, like B.B. King said, ain't nobody home, right? And so this two-ness has indelibly shaped the psychology of African people in the United States, as well as other people in the United States. So we got to get that. We also got to get with Annette Gordon-Reed in her book, her prize-winning book on Juneteenth. So she talks about how from the very beginning of their time in North America, Blacks have shown their deep and patriotic attachment to the country they helped to build, even, that's that term, even as they have been utterly realistic about the way many of their fellow countrymen viewed them. Persisting in the face of that reality has been a struggle for centuries, speaking of resilience. So we want to do that. We want to look at their lives. We want to look at these lives of these ancestors as what I call living practice texts that are reflective of what the great West African philosopher Hampate Ba refers to as the living tradition. the living tradition, living examples for us to understand the relationship between freedom and struggle, education and liberation, pedagogy and power, and the personal and the political. These are dialectics of reckoning and accountability that call into which we must respond and ultimately act in the interest of our African ancestors. And another concept and practice that they conceptualized in Northeast Africa called Suruj Ta. Can you all say that? Suruj Ta, translated, means raise up the good constantly. Raise up the good constantly. So what I'm doing is simply building on what they left. I came and found a foundation and I stood on it, and now I try to build on it. So what I want to do today is engage around the concept and the work of finding our song. This is something that the late great playwright August Wilson wrote in his play, Joe Turner's Come and Gone, where that character Bynum, the spirit told Bynum, you have to find your song. You have to find a way of imposing yourself, asserting yourself, creating and setting up and sustaining a relationship with history that is functional, collective, and committed. That is a deeply personal and purposeful life mission that is chock full of theoretical, pedagogical, and ethical challenges. Speaking of which, the late great, I mean, you've got to come, this information, these theories, these concepts, these ideas, they are put in the world for us to make use of them. Am I right? What good was it for Dr. King to evolve that sort of eloquence and that sorts of spiritual insight if we can't use the gifts that he left us? Is that right? So the late great African philosopher, Dr. Kobe Cambone, he left us another concept we call the African survival thrust, right? Have you ever mess with ants? You ever mess with bugs, ladybugs and ants and stuff? Even a creature as small and minuscule, they say never use a big word when a diminutive one will do. Even a creature as small as the ant, if you were to poke the ant, you see the ant either engaging in fight or flight or freeze. Right? So even something that small and that smaller container has an understanding and a right to the life force. You see what I'm saying? And so we want to look at that. And so with Dr. Kobe Cambone, when he articulates this concept in practice, he calls the African survival thrust. Right? That has two aspects to it, a methodological aspect and an epistemological aspect. Methodology meaning practice, epistemology meaning how we create knowledge and understanding around that thing. So this African survival thrust, you see it on display in Indiana. You see it in Detroit. You see it in St. Louis. You see it in Cape Town, South Africa. You see it in Jamaica, in Kingston, Jamaica. You see it in Barbados. You see it in Accra and Kumasi and Cape Coast. You see it all over Malawi and Senegal and throughout Gabon, throughout the Caribbean. You see this African survival thrust. That is, the life force is reached for by subjects in history, not objects in history. Find your song. So as a scholar and a culture worker, it is my stated mission to support and promote a position that foregrounds justice and truth speak. Now, I know the era that we're in. I mean, we live in an era, it's the peacock era. Look at me, look at me, look at me. We live in an era where it's okay to be anti-intellectual. We live in an era, and I run into this constantly in education. We are constantly, and I know you do too. I can look at some of your faces. We keep running into and having to deal with people who would rather believe than think. That's dangerous. And so we have to have an awareness of that, and we have to understand that we have a mission on behind that. So as a scholar and a culture worker, as I said, it's my stated mission to support and promote a position that foregrounds justice and truth speak. This is highly political work. Small p politics. I don't mess around with the distraction of Democrat, Republican Party. We not even invited to the party. Left wing, right wing, same bird. I don't get distracted by them histrionics. I don't get distracted by them psycholinguistics. And I do not, I never want to stand before an audience like this without telling you what the function and the purpose of racism is. Do you want to know? Where's Miss Trotter? It's getting late. I should shut it on down. Do they want to know? You heard it here first. The function of racism is to control white people. The purpose of racism is distraction. It's distraction. Because when they tell you, oh, you don't have any history, then you spend time trying to prove you got history. When they say you don't have any history worth teaching, then you spend time trying to prove you have history worth. When they say you don't have any culture, you spend time trying to show, I got a culture, you got a culture, all God's children got a. When they tell you that you don't have any heritage, you don't have humanity, then it's distraction. All right. And so in terms of controlling white people, the function of racism, for black people, guns and tanks get the job done in terms of controlling us. Right. So what we have to do is understand we have to make everything a moral question. At the end of the day, you have to ask the question, is it right or is it wrong? Is it right or is it wrong? And then you have to act on that. You have to do that because you cannot exist like driftwood. Okay, so I understand that this is highly political work and that it is a constant call to defend against those who seek to protect and extenuate the status quo. Find your song. That is the personal and social obligation we have to resist and transform reality is to be remembered that social realities are things that humans create. This is where the empowerment part comes into play because it reflects that what we have to do in order to understand, resist, and dismantle. To be emancipatory, liberatory, and critical insurrectionists insofar as injustice and hegemony are concerned, I am reminded of Marcus Garvey's statement, what humans have done, humans can do. So I want to spend these next few slides trying to connect because we were at our best, especially in the 19th century, when we understood that we were African people away from home. We were African people kidnapped and involved in the death and decadence of the diaspora, taken across the green sea of darkness, what the Arabs used to call the Atlantic Ocean, and became those who were forced kidnapped over here. And so any development that we did after the point of embarkment was unnatural development. Right? We were not supposed to develop in this way. But in as much as we are the leaven in the American loaf and we still here, right? We have begun over the centuries to adapt to the circumstance and become something else. That's that African survival thrust. So what I want to do with the story of Black resistance in Indiana, Black resilience in Indiana, which is a chapter in the proto-history of the Black diaspora. There was an article in Time magazine, 2014. It said, Africa's greatest strength, its diaspora. Like the East Indians, we represent over 2 billion, right? I just got back from Accra. I was in Accra, Cape Coast, and Kumasi. You go to Kumasi, that's like going to Detroit. That's like Motown. And then I came back. I was here for a day. I was telling somebody I had enough time to wash my clothes and mow my lawn. And then I got back on a plane and flew to Barbados. And I'm in Barbados. And in both instances, the first instance, we took a group of students back with us. The second instance, it was a group of professors and scholars on a cultural study mission. And so what I saw in those contexts, and it wasn't just from the people trying to sell you stuff, but it was from the cab drivers. It was from the people that work in the hotel. I love to ride the public transportation and talk to our people in the highway and in the byway. I don't stay in no fancy hotel. I like going among the people. And everywhere we went, cousin, you home. Welcome home. Cousin, you home. Welcome home. The 19th century Black American understood this. And this is why if you look at the names of institutions in the 19th century, everything almost always had African in front of it. African Methodist Episcopal Church, African Lodge, Prince Hall, and you know what I'm saying? So they had an understanding of where they came from and that connection. And so we didn't lose our history. We lost contact with it. But the history was there, and it began to come out really in the 1940s, which is around the birth of the field of Africana studies. So the story of Black resistance in Indiana is a part of the chapter in the proto-history of the Black diaspora. So from the swampland communities to the independent communities of self-liberated African, the swampland communities in Louisiana and North Carolina, the Quilombos in Brazil. I was in Brazil last year and visited a lot of these Quilombo or Maroon communities that are in Pernambuco and Recife and Salvador. Salvador, they call Salvador the blackest city on earth. Right? And you go there still, people, you can connect with people, even though I don't speak Portuguese. Yo, they know who Kendrick Lamar was. Huh? They knew who James Brown was, and they knew who that guy in the Oval Office was, right? So we were able to connect on cultural grounds because the African diaspora, the strength of that thing is borderless. So I'm trying to draw some connections between the African survival thrust in Indiana and the African survival thrust in the global Black diaspora, because we were at our best when we understood that we were not some lonely nation away from home, that we had connection and continuity with African descended peoples throughout the world. Their liberation struggle is our liberation struggle. And so, of course, the statue of Bencos Piojo in San Basilio in the Palenque in Colombia, South America. These are Maroon communities in Colombia, where African people were not so much running from, but running to and set up their own independent communities with a commerce, with a government, with all of these things that were operating independently. They were what we call self-liberated Africans, right? They said, I'm going to get out of here because we need to establish our own thing, because this slavery thing, this ain't working, all right? And then, of course, the Cimarrones in Cuba and Puerto Rico and Panama, the same concept where you see an African survival thrust at play, and these Africans escaping into the forests of Suriname, the forest of Cuba, the forest of Panama and Peru, and setting up independent autonomous communities. The Maroons in Jamaica, right? And the Maroons, there were even Maroons in Texas and Illinois, right? So this history is there for us to blow the dust off of it. So Dr. King, I have his image up here because it helps me to remember to tell you about the Black freedom struggle, to define it. The Buddhist philosopher Confucius, he said that the beginning of wisdom is calling things by their proper name. So the Black freedom struggle, we define it as a rich and powerful tradition of agency, resistance, remembering, putting back together, remembering, and cultural recovery. What are the modes in the Black freedom struggle? It's political, social, rhetorical, artistic, militarism, religious, etc. And then how is it manifested over time? Through these movements that we understand, the civil rights movement, the first and second civil rights movement, the Black student movement in the 1960s, Deacons for Defense, Black Power movement, Congress of African People, a CAP, the Black Lives Matter movement, Afrocentricity, on and on and on and on. Now, this is going to get rough, because we got to reflect on some of the challenges, the distinctive challenges in Indiana. And I believe that I am among thinking people. Is that right? I'm among thinking people, and I'm among people who understand that we also have to be courageous, right? Of all of the characters from The Wizard of Oz, the one you should not be identifying with right now is who? The Cowardly Lion, all right? Now, he came through in the end. You got to give him a little credit, but it took a long time. The movie was almost over, right? And so we got to understand these distinctive challenges, which has included the law itself. The 1851 Indiana Constitution contained provisions that were hostile to Black folks, effectively barring them from settling in the state and restricting their rights. As the historian Emma Lou Thornborough observed, Indiana's policies exhibited an, quote, intense racial prejudice, unquote, and a fear of free Black labor. You got to understand that this thing all comes down to sex and employment. Sex and employment. You should not consider yourself educated until you have read W.E.B. Du Bois's masterwork, Black Reconstruction. Do not consider yourself educated until you have sat down with that 900-page book and read it. I read every word on every page. I couldn't put it down. I took it in the vein, right? So you got to understand that, because that man captured an entire period and gave us a fresh articulation of what that meant and how the United States actually works. What are some more distinctive challenges? Well, the 1850 Fugitive Slave Act. The application of this federal law empowered vigilante citizens to hunt down runaways and return them to enslavement, not unlike the actions of the Trump administration in its targeting and seizing and rendition of undocumented citizens as well as documented ones. All history is a current event. Everything that has ever happened continues to happen until we stop it from happening in that way. Another practice that was distinctive to not just Indiana, but also Kentucky and other parts of the South is man stealing or kidnapping. This was the pre-American Civil War practice of kidnapping into enslavement in the United States, which occurred in both free and slave states, and both fugitive slaves and free black people were transported to slave markets and sold, often multiple times. As the internal slave trade increased in the early 19th century, so did kidnapping, right? And then, of course, lynchings. These racial terror lynchings, there were approximately 14 reported lynchings in Indiana. You believe I was talking to someone once, I don't want to tell you much about the person, but I mentioned that there was like, there's 14 over documented lynchings. These are the ones that are documented, it's 14. And the person I was talking to exhibited a disposition that was an insignificant number. I said, that's 14 more than it should have been, whether it was 14 or 1,400. So I'm talking about the attitude, and it tells you a lot. Okay, so the lynchings, there were approximately 14 reported lynchings in Indiana. These racial terror lynchings was not exclusively a Southern phenomena. The Equal Justice Initiative has identified more than 300 victims killed outside the former Confederacy between 1877 and 1950. All right. And then, of course, repatriation schemes. We heard about this from Abraham Lincoln when he was trying to send black people to South America. But I didn't know about this, that this was going on in the white Democrats in the Indiana state legislature in the 1850s. So Indiana appeared so anxious to dispense with its black population that the legislature appropriated $5,000 to colonize black people, then who were also residents of the state, to Africa, Liberia, and Haiti. The Indiana Colonization Society, which was really a subsidiary of the American Colonization Society, the ICS, born out of the ACS, formed in 1829 and was based right here in Indianapolis, advocated for the relocation of free people of color and emancipated enslaved Africans to settlements in Africa. So in remarks that capture, and I show him too, to show you that all history is a current event. Anyone ever heard of him? This guy was striving to be the American Führer. He was so enamored with Adolf Hitler. He passed away, I think, at the age of like 89 in Noblesville. But he spent his years creating a fascist movement inside the United States that was similar to what Hitler's Germany. So there's been a really kind of odd and cockeyed relationship between Nazism and fascism in Germany and Italy, and the apartheid within the United States, especially here in this state. It's really, it's disturbing to read about. So he founded an organization called the Silver Shirts, and they had actually became so popular. He was a failed playwright. He was kind of like the Steve Bannon of his day, right? Serious. Failed playwright, wanted to get recognition in Hollywood, but he couldn't write. No one's interested in his ideas and stuff. So he turned to fascism, right? And that was really interesting because there was tens of thousands of people. He was friends, had George Nelson Rockwell on speed dial, and he's bucking to become the leading fascist of his day during the 1930s and 40s. Okay. So we got to understand him as well. And if you want the scoop on him, I really urge you to check out Rachel Maddow's podcast called Ultra, Season 1. Season 2 is dope too, but Season 1, that's some of the most well-researched stuff. And Rachel is really, she's fun to listen to. She's quirky, but she lays that history out in a way that even a 14-year-old would not go to sleep. So in remarks that capture the political and social sentiments of many white citizens and elected officials in 1851, Thurnborough writes, quote, "But two courses remain for Indiana to pursue. She must either become the receptacle of the wandering, worthless, and corrupting Negro population of the surrounding states, or else, like them, adopt some stringent means of protecting herself against the alarming evil with which she was threatened. This is a quote from a white Democratic elected official in 1851. He said, quote, "Ours is the land of the white man. We cannot consent to divide our birthright with our inferiors. We shall remain the Negroes must leave or consent to be forever held in subjection." Those remarks were given in the well of the Senate, and they were published in the New Albany Ledger newspaper, August 13, 1851. Now, moving from that quickly, I want to deal with, okay, you see this sign from the Department of Homeland Security? So all history, I'm telling you, all history is a current event. All history is a current event. All right. This is out of the New York Times. Don't get mad at me. This is New York Times published this, reported on this. Okay. Southern Poverty Law Center, over 1,300 hate groups in 2024. We got to look at that. And then this figure between 1877 and 1950, over 6,500 Black people lynched in 12 Southern states. So persisting, as Annette Gordon-Reed says, in the face of that reality has been a struggle for centuries. Let's turn the corner in these remaining minutes, just a few minutes left. And I want to deal with some of the distinctive markers of Black resilience in Indiana. Some people don't like to, people have told me this, that they don't like to read history because it's too depressing. I think that's a cop-out. I think that's a cop-out. And I think that's an excuse, because I'm going to tell you the truth. I'm going to give you one book to read, and I'm going to tell you, if you read this book, if your hair is already white, it's going to be whiter. Hey, okay, if you read this book, all it is a collection of newspaper clippings that this man collected from the Times-Picayune and the Chicago Defender and the Cleveland Plain Dealer, the Cleveland, all over. And the book is by a chronicler named Ralph Ginsberg. We had a lot of white Jewish brothers and sisters who were responsible for helping create the field of Black studies. People don't know that, but it's the truth. These pioneers like William Melville Herskovitz, who wrote The Myth of the Negro Past, they were doing their work in the 1940s and 60s. Someone should do a study on that. The white Jewish, critical white scholars who helped foundationalize the field of Black studies. So Ralph Ginsberg was among those who I respect as a historian and a chronicler. The book is called 100 Years of Lynchings, plural. It's just newspaper clippings, but it was like racist pornography because it was so graphic. These were published in the newspapers. But I want to turn quickly to distinctive markers of Black resilience. And I want to remind us about this Black freedom struggle motif, that it represents these efforts that are undertaken by people of African ancestry. Zip code don't matter, geography don't matter, the calendar don't matter. To articulate, establish, secure, maintain, and sustain their freedom, dignity, culture, history, traditions, and inheritances and lives. So the Underground Railroad routes in Indiana, a spider web of routes in Indiana that generally went from Posey to South Bend, from Corydon to Porter, and from Madison to DeKalb County, with many stops in between. Scholars used to imagine the Underground Railroad as these three distinctive arteries, but new and fresh scholarship on this showed it's more than just three disparate lines. It's more like a spider web of activity because people were zigzagging. And also freedom suits, S-U-I-T-S, the freedom suits. These were lawsuits that were filed by enslaved people against slaveholders to assert claims to freedom. Some of us know, but all of us should know about the cases of Polly Strong. We know Polly Strong. It was an enslaved woman who was living in Vincennes, Indiana, one of the state's oldest cities. And during the year 1820, that's 45 years before the 13th Amendment abolished slavery, she began working with a lawyer, abolitionist lawyer, Amory Kinney. And of course, Mary Bateman Clark, all right? Mary Bateman Clark the ancestor of our sister Eunice Trotter, who successfully fought for her freedom and became a pioneer in ending forced labor. See, Indiana, they tried to be slick, yo. They tried to be slick, yo. They were like, well, we don't have slavery. We just got perpetual indentured servitude. Sort of like the British Museum. The British Museum, they're good at these contradictions, you know, because if you took all of the stuff out of the British Museum that they've stolen from all over the world, they wouldn't have anything in there. And so when Shekinah Diop was working with Ivan Van Sertima, trying to recover the pieces of the splinters of the nose of the great Sphinx, and he's on a transatlantic hookup with the British Museum curators and authorities, they said, well, no, if we started giving things back, then we wouldn't have anything in our museum. And he said, well, we won't give you the splinters of the Sphinx's nose. We'll call it a permanent loan. Of course, there's no such thing as a permanent loan. So Indiana was slick, yo. They were slick, yo. They were slick. They said, we're not going to have slavery. We're just going to have forever indentured servitude, right? Which is interesting. And so in the face of that, we're talking about resilience. There were also on the part of Black folk and other white pioneers in protest in this state, diverse attempts at self-liberation, such as Alexander McClure. We heard about Henry Box Brown shipping himself from Virginia to Philly, but some of us, I don't know, maybe we didn't hear about Alexander McClure, who also shipped himself in a box 11 years later from Nashville. He got caught, though, in Seymour, Indiana. They have a replica at that settlement house in that museum of the box that he was in. Also, another African freedom thrust was the formation of Black institutions, Afro-American League and the AME Church, anti-slavery societies, the Cherry Street YMCA, which was founded by Dr. George Buckner, the Negro Business League, and the Colored Knights of Pythias. And also the formation of what we call these Black settlements and neighborhoods, including over 60 documented Black settlements across 43 counties before the Civil War. And so by 1860, there were more than 60 of these settlements in Indiana, included Lyles Station, Roundtree and Sand Hill in Gibson County, Roberts Settlement in Hamilton County, Cabin Creek, Greenville, and Snow Hill in Randolph County, Burnett, Lost Creek, and Underwood in Vigo County. So many of these settlements had nicknames that even defined their purpose. Like there was one they called it Colored Freedom. That was the moniker for Du Bois County, Pinkston community, Colored Freedom. Sound like a Netflix thing, all right? And so at so many times throughout our history, our ancestors found themselves in the deep grip of what Soren Kierkegaard called sickness unto death. That is the numbing of the soul by despair that leads to moral and physical debasement. And so in the midst of all of this, it's fitting and proper that we examine the role of history. Key questions from the Black liberation tradition. I'm going to skip about because I'm running low on time. I could go on, but I think you get the point, or at least understand where I'm coming from. We have work to do to create the just society. I brought up Ralph Ginsburg because when you read what happened to these Black ancestors in the 1910s and 1920s and 1930s, it makes what's going on today look like Sunday school, look like romper room. Don't tell me about struggle and don't tell me about any of that until you read the story of Sam Hose, until you read the story of Luther Howard and his wife. There's children in here I don't even want to tell you. So when I hear people get knocked out over being inconvenienced a little bit, right? And then having things snatched from them, and then we can't find it in ourselves to muster community. I don't want to throw the person under the bus or critique them because we want to correct them and not destroy them. But I do want to encourage that person to widen their gaze and to have a relationship with history that goes beyond the next 30 minutes. Inherent in our possibility is not only what we can do for ourselves, but what people of goodwill have proved can be done throughout history. In this formation, we are then personally and socially obligated to dare to make the most of our lives, dare to pursue the possibilities inherent in oneself and the possibilities posed by history and people. But we can't be cowards. And this is why courage is the enabling virtue. You don't have any other virtues unless you have courage. Christians talk about you got to have faith and hope and love. It takes courage to have faith. It takes courage to hope, takes courage to love, but you can't be a coward because you come from a great line. We come out of a magnificent, rich tradition, and we have to be worthy of our ancestors who did more in the analog age than we doing in the digital age, right? So you got to stop. We got to stop. And so in the cold light of day, how do we become complacent with what Henry Giroux refers to as this unfortunate era of casino capitalism, the carceral state, and a neoliberal value system of vampire empire, walking dead, endless war, and a social politics of disposability authored by outlaws and scofflaws? How do we fight and resist the urge to sell out to the false values of narcissism, self-absorption, and American individualism? This is our human challenge. The challenge fastened on us by history to speak the truth and to confront falsehood, to develop and exercise a critical agency in order to engage and transform ourselves and society. This is function and purpose of a critically engaged pedagogy. At its best, it's a praxis that is rooted in equity and operationalized to foster community, understanding, and shared social wealth. As we reflect on the historical challenges and triumphs in my closing remarks, 30 seconds, and as we face mounting contemporary challenges to our very organic existence, Black diasporic populations in general and Black Americans in particular would be well served by understanding our local history and heritage in the context of a more elaborate and sophisticated lens that appreciates the global context of our freedom struggle. All right, it's enduring, it is immutable. And so in the closing remarks from the great African philosopher Kheti, Kheti, from the 3rd century in what you call Egypt, but what we call Kemet, in the remarks of the great African philosopher Kheti, who was a man who lived, he wrote, quote, "Follow in the footsteps of your ancestors. For the mind is trained through knowledge. Behold their words endure in books. Open them and read them and follow their wise counsel. For one who is taught becomes skilled. And skilled speech and wisdom," Kheti said, "is stronger than all fighting. No one can overcome the skillful. A wise person is a school for the nobles, and those who are aware of his or her knowledge do not attack them. No evil takes place when they are near, and truth comes to her in its essential form, shaped in the sayings of the ancestors." So I want to thank you very kindly for your attention. I'll leave you with these last 2 books. You need a study group. And I don't mean no book club where you come trying to get numbers. I'm talking about we need to go back. We need to go back to study groups where we actually show up and we read the book together. And I don't mean read a paragraph and hear a rumor. I don't mean watch a doggone TikTok video. We need to go back to reading. And as Francis Cress Welsing, the great Francis Cress Welsing said, we got to get a PhD in broom. We got to get a PhD in broom. Stop throwing down trash where Black people live, work, learn, and play. We got to do that. So I'll leave you with that. Thank you very much. Thank you very kindly.
Was that impactful, you all? Dr. Kazembe is going to stay for a moment and join the panel. So could all panel members please come up to the stage? Come on up. While they do that, I want to just take a very brief moment to encourage everyone to just reflect on any nugget or kernel of what you heard. It came to our ears, but in this moment, I'd like for you to take a brief moment to breathe it into your spirit, to remember what you heard, so that when you leave here, you tell someone what you heard today, that it doesn't just stay in this room, but that you allow for it to have some motivation and movement in your behavior, your thoughts, and your actions when you walk out of here today. My name is Dr. Benetta Johnson. I am a licensed psychologist here in Indianapolis, and I am the moderator for this evening. We know who Dr. Kazembe is. He is here to my right. Next, we have Ms. Cynthia Newman. She is a registered investment principal, has a mission to empower and inspire others to live their best lives. As co-owner of the Newman Group, she has spent over 30 years helping people understand their finances and making smarter money decisions. She is a graduate of Purdue University and a licensed minister. Ms. Newman combines her financial expertise with a passion for serving others. She enjoys engaging with her community, sharing financial knowledge, and serving on various boards. Cynthia's dedication to helping others has earned her numerous awards, both professionally and personally. Let's welcome Ms. Newman. Next, we have Reverend Dr. Winterbourne Harrison-Jones, a scholar, author, community leader, philanthropist, and distinguished churchman. He is the esteemed senior pastor of the historic Witherspoon Presbyterian Church of Indianapolis, Indiana. He is a fifth-generation minister and a proud graduate of Fisk University. Dr. Harrison-Jones has earned a doctorate of ministry from Colgate, Rochester, Crozer Divinity School, and is currently pursuing a PhD in urban education from Indiana University. As a scholar, Dr. Harrison-Jones investigates how theology and philanthropic resources within Christian tradition are valued for interpreting and responding to public concerns related to economic deprivation, religious bigotry, racism, inequity, and structural inequality. Let's welcome Reverend Harrison-Jones. Last but not least, we have Dr. Danielle Henderson. She earned her PhD in clinical psychology from the University of Louisville. She completed both her pre-doctoral clinical internship and postdoctoral fellowship at Indiana University School of Medicine. Her postdoctoral fellowship in clinical health psychology emphasized cardiac, pulmonary, behavioral medicine. In October of 2018, she began her clinical track faculty position in the Department of Psychiatry at Indiana University School of Medicine. In December of 2021, she was appointed Assistant Dean for the Center for Institutional Engagement. Dr. Henderson works as a clinician and supervisor in a variety of clinical settings. She is passionate about providing education on mental health. She often gives presentations to community groups and organizations. Let's welcome Dr. Henderson. As we gather to honor Juneteenth, a day of liberation, remembrance, and joy, we also uplift the extraordinary resilience of the Black community. Black resilience is not just about surviving injustice, but about transforming pain into power, oppression into opportunity, and struggle into strength. It is reflected in every generation that rises, that rebuilds, and reimagines a better future. It is reflected in us. Today, as we engage in this conversation about resilience, we celebrate that enduring spirit, the brilliance, creativity, and courage that continues to move our community forward. We will begin our conversation with each panelist sharing their reflection on resilience within their area of expertise. We will start with Dr. Henderson.
Hello. Okay. Can you all hear me okay? Okay, so I've been thinking about this prompt quite a bit in preparation for this panel. And I think I'm going to kind of flip it from my lens as working as a clinical psychologist. I think one of the most important ways we as Black people, people of color, can demonstrate resilience is by asking for help. We come from a people where, again, with this resilience, sometimes, and as presentation earlier, we've been forced to do it on our own, individually or within our smaller communities. Again, as we've been highlighting throughout today, it's a very scary time for a lot of us, which I think for some, we may tend to even kind of pull in even more within ourselves individually, and maybe even missing out or not connecting with our communities anymore. So I really think in this time, what resilience can mean and look like is stepping in and asking for help. As best as you can, finding that vulnerable space to reach out to people in your community, to let them know truly what is going on with you. In my field, there's, of course, we talk about how's your mood, how have things been going in your circles, trying to find different ways of connecting. I know one thing I sometimes do is what color are you today? And so that can, again, kind of enrich the ways that you're talking about. Well, for me, you know, my vibrant pink means this, my blue means this, my yellow means this. And really, again, stepping out and trying to talk about how we're feeling. And also with that, going back to community, I think, again, we cannot do this alone. We should not do this alone. We come from people, again, who have strong community foundations and have people there to help them and reach out. And so that's my biggest message is resilience means asking for help and finding those places where it's safe to do so.
Thank you, Dr. Henderson. Dr. Harrison-Jones.
Thank you. Let me say thank you to Dr. Henderson, and what a joy it is to be on the panel, and to Eunice, who I do not see, who's there next to Brother Winston, for the invitation. I too, Dr. Henderson, have thought a lot about this, and let me say again what a joy it is to be challenged always in the presence of Dr. Kazembe, having been one of his students. Much of what I am going to share, I owe to the wonderful community of scholars that have shaped me, not only at Indiana University, but in the various places I've been able to study and to be loved. For me, this piece about Black resilience, particularly around spirituality, I was challenged by it, because I do not want to speak as though this is a sort of monolithic thing. When people talk about the Black church, you know, we have the danger sometimes of overgeneralizing. But what I do want to say is that for me, this work of Black resilience and spirituality can best be understood in three ways. And I think it requires three different things. I think there is a remembering that must take place, as Dr. Kazembe has already framed, then a decentering that must occur, and then a reconstruction. And so, as all good Baptist preachers, those are 3 points, you see. The first is a remembering. And when I talk about remembering, there is something innate in the bloodline of the African that understands deity and community and love and connection. It is a part of our ancestral, divinely endowed DNA. And one of the challenges, even in my pastoral ministry, as I teach and preach this, is that we have become disconnected from our ways of knowing. As we have battled with and responded to, and sometimes been co-opted by these systems, these statements, these social atrocities, you see. But it is already in us. I want to frame that when I talk to young people, when I preach, when I talk about Black liberation theology, when I talk about resistance, this is in us. No one has to give it to us. It must be excavated. It must be recovered. But there is something in the lifeblood of the African that must be reconnected. We must. It is our sort of divinely given survival instinct. I think, secondly, there must be a decentering, and I speak now specifically from someone who is a part of the Judeo-Christian tradition. The theological heresy of whiteness as right that continues to choke much of the Black religious tradition, and I speak broadly intentionally here, where deity is tied to racial identity, where anyone non-white is not endowed by right to the same privileges, blessings of God. This carnal sin is the enemy of the natural liberative spirit that has already been planted in the heart, I would say, of humanity, but particularly of the African. And we have been wrestling with this now for over 500 years, particularly in the Western church. The lies that have been supported by the misuse and abuse of sacred text. And even the Black churchmen and church women who by sometimes omission and sometimes by intentionality have bought into an agenda that uses the pulpit to further subject the mind and the heart and the will to a kind of misordering of the cosmos that is not a part of God's vision for the world as I understand it. So there must be a decentering in our recovery of ancestral memory. We must return again to and I love what Dr. Kazembe talked about, the importance of reading, the importance of research, reclaiming the sacred tradition for ourselves. You know, Mary did not hide in Egypt with a white baby. On the walls of our church, in our youth wing that is named after the parents of Dr. Patricia Payne, who's a member of Witherspoon, there's a quote. We have a wall full of great quotes with people from African diaspora. And I lifted the words of Matthew. And under each name, we tell you who the person is, Mary Ben Hopperthune, who she is. And under the words of Matthew spoken by Jesus, I wrote African prophet and son of the living God. We must put these things back together. So there must be a decentering. And I will say that this work must be conscious and it must be intentional, and it cannot be done by white people. I believe a part of this decentering is tied to my third point, which is the importance of construction, that we must use the incubators, I call them Black sacred spaces, whether they are barbershops, sanctuaries, mosques, our places of gathering. We must use them again as a laboratory to both inspire and challenge our people. I am too distorted or disturbed about man, as Benjamin Mays calls it, at what is happening in the public sphere. But I do not allow what is happening in the public sphere to distract me from the work that I can do in the spaces and in the places where I have been charged as a steward. So if nowhere else in the city you're going to see African iconography and African American literature, you're going to see it at 3535 West Kessler Boulevard at Witherspoon Presbyterian Church. And if by chance, and I have many Caucasian colleagues, I'm Presbyterian, which is not a Black tradition. I have many white colleagues that enter our sacred space and talk about being uncomfortable, Dr. Kazembe. And I tell them all the time, when I was raised in Washington, D.C. and went to the Basilica of the Immaculate Conception and saw that gigantic mural of God on the dome, I had enough sense to know that they just ran out of color. There was a shortage. The color palette was, the tariffs, had stopped the, And so I charge Black and brown leaders who do have the social agency, who do have the resources to use, this thing with my friend Tony Radford and Newfields, which is really Old Fields with a new name, and the attempt to erase. And I told Tony, I said, well, they won't hang your work on their walls. Bring them to the church. And we'll host a fellowship reception. The meatballs at Newfields and the meatballs at the church are the same meatballs, understand? But my third piece is the reconstruction. Walter Brueggemann, a great theologian who just died actually, talks about the power of the prophetic imagination. John says, writing from Patmos, and I do think there was some, John, Revelation's a little deep, 7 candlesticks, 7 stars. There may have been some use of other herbs by John out there on Patmos. But he says, then I saw a new heaven, and then I saw a new earth. I think after we deconstruct, and this is a part of that distraction that Dr. Kazembe talks about, I think that we must rally the best of our spirits also to construct. What do you see in its place? How do we rally the best of our human resources, our philanthropic resources, our intellectual resources, from across every sector to create something new? Not new because it has never existed, but new because we too are charged as agents. We are not only charged or to respond to or to coward in the face of, but with our own financial resources of head, heart, and hands, we too can leave this world better. And Charles Adams, a great preacher out of Detroit, the Hartford Baptist Church, would often say that this is not pie in the sky as you wait by and by. This is something sound on the ground to be found while you are still around. They are still blowing off the noses of the Sphinx. And so agency, this piece, agency, I think, is something that must be laid claim to. And so it is a remembering that this is a part of who we are. When God shaped man and blew breath into them, we by divine right have this resilience in us. And then a decentering, we must remember for ourselves who we are and whose we are. And then a reconstruction, after we have deconstructed, what then will we leave? What will be the footprint of our lives? What will be the legacy that we leave, not leave behind, but the legacy that we live each and every day?
Thank you, Reverend.
Good evening. Thank you for inviting me. I don't see Eunice. I think she walked out, or maybe she's working, as you do when you plan an event like this. And thank you all for being here. I am, again, Cynthia Newman, and thrilled to be able to bring financial resilience into the conversation. I think that Juneteenth gives us an opportunity to talk about freedom, but we really cannot talk about freedom unless we include financial freedom in the picture. So just to cut to the chase and get to some things that I know we need to think about. And one of those is that the racial wealth gap in America still exists, and it is widening. We are doing better as a race. I looked up some information about where are we since the pandemic. Before the pandemic, the median wealth for Black America, and median just means half the people have more, half the people have less, was $26,000. Today, it's grown to $44,000. And that's a good thing. It's a 60% increase. But when we compare it to our white counterparts at $244,000, we lag behind. Now, we are all aware that systemic injustice exists. We can't even have this conversation without acknowledging systemic injustice exists. But we do have to acknowledge that we have a role to play in our own financial freedom. And I want to say that again, because sometimes I think we can hide behind systemic injustice. We have to acknowledge it and not succumb to it. So we have a role in our financial empowerment. Here's just a few more things. That when you look at that 44,000, it is highly consisted of home equity and vehicles, things that are not liquid assets. So when we have an emergency, when we have a financial struggle, we haven't put ourselves in a position that we have a place to go to get out of that struggle, and we get further behind the 8 ball. One more thing about statistics. 11% of businesses are owned by African Americans in America. We're only 11% business owners, yet entrepreneurship is one of the primary ways we can build wealth. So if you say, well, what are the things that will help us with our financial resistance? First of all, I love the idea of Sankofa, a look back to look forward. Where have we been? We are a resourceful people. We've been talking about settlements all day. What did they do? They worked on the weekend. They pooled their money. It was Ujamaa, cooperative economics. What can we do? Just a few, 3 things, and it is this. We have to have personal responsibility. We must be resourceful, and we have to have a strategy. Personal responsibility, resourcefulness, and a strategy. I've been working with families financially for more than 30 years. A long time, a lot of families. I shared with Eric somewhere in the audience that my husband and I have been doing what we call building wealth one family at a time. One of the keys for financial responsibility is you've got to close the back door to your finances. You have to track everything and ask yourself, where is my money going? That's responsibility. How am I using what's coming in the door? Systemic, yes. And yet we still have access to financial resources. You've got to think about the fact that you must be resourceful. How am I using what I have? Where is what I have going? Where does it come from? I love to use this phrase, and it's one I coined: own what you consume. Own what you consume. We are all consumers of something. We should be producers of something. It's back to the 11% of wealth. If we are 11% business owners, but we're using things every day, we should find a way to own it, whether it's investing with it or creating it, goods and services ourselves, own what we consume. And then lastly, and I know we'll get more in conversation about these financial strategies, is this idea that we must leave wealth behind for the next generation. It's a dirty word in a lot of public places, but something as simple as life insurance, it's a wealth instrument. Why do we fall behind? Because 48% of us as African Americans have none, not at work, not at home. The fact is, 30% of us will be financially devastated within 1 month if the breadwinner dies. So when we talk about how do we bring financial empowerment, again, we know systemic challenge exists. It will exist. Benevolence programs are going away. DEI is going away. Affirmative action is going away. And what is left is us to look at ourselves and determine how do we do the best thing for ourselves financially and then leave something for future generations. Our ancestors did it. They left us a blueprint and we have way more than what they had. Now it is our responsibility to move that forward.
Thank you, Ms. Newman.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. I want to talk now as an artist. I'm a poet and a teaching artist and a spoken word artist. And one of the things that I am concerned about is the state of our art. Our art has always been used in my writing, in my research. I use ART, A-R-T, as an acronym. A-R-T, a revolutionary tool. Revolution meaning complete constructive change. And so I'm a little concerned about the state of our art, the state of the relationship that we have with our art. And I think I have a 19-year-old daughter, and people her age, slightly older, people younger than her, and then just people from across the generations. What I've observed is not only a falling away, but from the use of art, but also people have become suspicious of their own curiosity. Right? They're afraid to even venture out in exploration and to explore alternatives. And so I think when you think about the fifth tenet of COINTELPRO, which was the counterintelligence program of J. Edgar Hoover, the FBI, which targeted Black leaders and organizations in the 1960s, the fifth tenet had to do with art. And it had to do with the fact that, you know, as Socrates said, if you want to control the people, you got to control the art, right? And this is why you see segregation in streaming and in the radio and stuff like that, because when people are able to come together, then they're able to ask, you know, better questions and, you know, have a more diverse sort of engagement. So I'm a little concerned with the state of our art. I'm concerned about the fact that we seem to be, I'm talking technically here, ignoring musical principles that we spent the last century and a half developing. And so everything today is flat and stayed and beats and loops, beats and loops, beats and loops. I teach poetry, and I'm a student of poetry. And this is like my 48th year as a poet. And so I talk about the distinction and really the relationship between form and content. Form, think of it as how. Content, think of it as what. And so at our best as artists, 22-year-old Stevie Wonder talking book, we strike an equilibrium between form and content. That is, if Shakespeare were alive today, he would not be writing the 14-line sonnet. Die fi, die far, dar fifth, fifth, die far, dar fifth thee. He wouldn't be writing and locking up all of that rhetorical and energy in the, he'd be writing for Netflix. You see Hamlet on Tubi. You see what I'm saying? The form would change because the minds of the people have changed. And then, so I think that form is critical, but I think content is principle. At the end of the day, what are you saying? What are you saying? And so when you have a country like this, the Western Hemisphere in general, privileges form over content. Meaning, you know, you have a beat, ooh, 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 ooh. You say, oh, I love that beat. And you bounce to it, and then you look at the lyrics, what are they saying? I'm gonna kill my mama, I'm gonna kill my sister. Like, that's what I've been saying? Yeah, that's what you've been saying. You see what I'm saying? So that's a person that is privileged form over content. And when you look at these strappers, female rappers, and when you look at some of the young men in hip hop culture, there was a website called The Undefeated. It's sort of like a sports and culture website. 2021, I think they did an article on there. It's still online. You can find it. It's called Where Did the Love Go? And it talked about the fact that there has been a decline in Black love songs. That the Black artists are they're producing the same amount of songs every year, roughly 45 to 48 songs a year. But over time, and it began really seeing the decline really right around 2006, 2007, whereas in the 70s, 80s, and the previous decades, there were dozens of Black love songs. How many of y'all remember Alexander O'Neal and Luther and Keith Sweat and all of that? They don't do songs like that. So when you listen to the music today, it has a death spirit in it that kills resilience. Now, I'm not into censorship. It has a right to be out there. But I also think that just like food, film, fashion, books, and you can critique it, right? You can have an intelligent critique. I don't believe you can critique art unless you understand it, right? So I listen to this stuff, but it lacks it lacks vitamins, it lacks nutritional value. It's sort of like hyper-processed food, right? And it has a death spirit in it. And it actually deadens, it has a deadening effect on the mind. It makes people incurious. It encourages them to move away from reflective thinking or thinking at all. This is in the music. You see what I'm saying? And so the artist is more influential than the politician. You see what I'm saying? So we have to really, if we want to get back in touch with resilience, we have to, I think, it would do well to examine the way our forebears in music and in art, and I'm talking about visual art as well as performing art, how they use their art as a revolutionary tool, as a weapon in a direction of struggle. We just lost Bernice Johnson Reagan, Sweet Honey in the Rock. And we lost Sly Stone recently, you know. So, but when you look at those songs, I'm not going to go into this. I'm going to end with this point. There is and has always been a criteria for judging art. And there's a bunch of different rules and principles for judging art. The number one rule about whether it's high art or low art, does it stand the test of time? There is a reason Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird continues to be assigned. There's a reason James Baldwin, The Fire Next Time, continues to be assigned. There is a reason why you have songs, Curtis Mayfield, Keep On Pushing, The Impressions, those songs that are immutable, Adore, As by Stevie Wonder. I mean, these songs, because they have struck that equilibrium between form and content, and they have become having that kind of staying power. And so when we lack that, we lose the ability to be informed by the very thing that we consume. And if you trace, and if you email me, I will send you a list, and I will send you some of the things that I'm reading around art, because it's critically important. Last point, I'm going to mention and suggest one book to you by the great cultural writer. Her name is Martha Bayles, Bayles. The book is called Whole, Hole, Hole in Our Soul, The Loss of Beauty and Meaning in American Popular Music. It's a book, I'm telling you, it's like you sit and read, it's like having a conversation with your crazy auntie. I mean, that's how she writes. It's a very conversational, and it ain't this highfalutin academic stuff. It's conversational text. And so I really, really urge people to read that book, because what she does in that book is she analyzes this, and she asserts that, music is supposed to have harmony and melody and feeling. It's supposed to really uplift you. That's why you can listen to certain songs with your great grandmother in the room. Music is not supposed to tear you down. It's not supposed to be a vexation to your spirit. You know what I mean? So I'm not talking about censorship, but I'm talking about discrimination, being very discriminate about the things that you put in your brain. Because when you put them in there, you listening to it, then it starts working on you. And that's especially important for these young people today in the TikTok generation.
Thank you, Dr. Kazembe. We do have a moment for one brave soul. If you have a question that you would like to pose, okay. Okay, Reverend Ajabu.
Just one.
Just one, that's it. You the rising star. We just got one Reverend Ajabu, that's it. Good, it's so good to see you. These my kids right here. Right here. Yeah, okay, but we're using time. We're gonna catch up later. Okay, what, Reverend Ajabu, what's your question?
Question is this.
Okay.
If we understand that we're from Africa, and that's our beginning, and we understand that we got here and Africa is the richest land in the world today, why would the poorest people?
Thank you.
No, I'm not through. I'm not through.
One question, Reverend
If I may
Ajabu.
finish, if I may finish.
Okay,
Yeah, if I may finish.
okay.
And if we have come here,
Mm-hmm,
we are out of our natural behavior.
mm-hmm.
And we have a moral foundation. And we keep trying to be part of this stuff that's treating us like it's treating us. We need some help. Where do we get the help?
Thank you. Thank you, Reverend Ajabu. Panel members, you have 1 minute to give your response to a very in-depth, comprehensive, complex question. But if you can give a brief response in 1 minute, we would love to hear your feedback.
Oh, quick, just 40 seconds. I think one of the things, and especially in this era, that we're encouraged to think is that all hope is lost. That is a disillusioned kind of existence that we have to live, and that there's not. So I want to encourage people to push back against that. And as you push back against that, lean into justice. And also, and this is something very immediate that everybody in here can do, and it won't cost you any money. Begin talking engaging and interacting with each other without these devices, right? Because it's an anti-human sort of thing that they've set up, and it's anti-life, and these people, they don't believe in the future. They don't believe in the future, but I'm saying that they don't have control over that. So when you begin pulling back and coming out of these devices and stuff and begin getting back to ourselves, and start with your families. Starts with younger people talking to older people talking to younger people. Young people need to have exuberance and stuff like that. And they should be encouraged to express themselves, but they have to have guardrails. Older people, we got to stop doing this, right? And I never thought I'd say we, but I'm 55, so. But we got to stop doing that, and we have to understand the fact that we were 19 at one point, but we also have to know how to give it in terms of measured doses. But I think when we can come back as family, as human beings, as neighbor on neighbor, Jessica Niebuhr's Collective Courage book comes to mind, then I think we can begin sort of breaking down a lot of these invisible, artificial, and toxic barriers that have been created where people, don't even, you can go an entire week and not even see your neighbor. So these are things that are in our control. I think they're practical, and I think they're going to have a serious ROI, return on investment, over time.
Thank you, Dr. Kazembe.
It's an excellent question, but financially, literally help is everywhere. And when I say help is everywhere, I mean help lies in us. It lies in sharing information. It is not that difficult to not be poor. Do the statistics say that African Americans are at the bottom of the class? They do. But again, I'm going to go back to responsibility, because poorness is also a state of mind, first of all. And the decision to remain poor is a mindset. So there are places, I'm sure you've known me for a long time, that there are lots of people who will help individuals, but I want to keep going back to, we know the systemic issues financially exist, redlining. You couldn't get a loan from a bank. As a business owners can't necessarily just walk in and get credit today, whereas other nationalities, Hispanics or others, can go into a bank and, be able to have some programs potentially, and those are going away. However, I want to keep coming back to, financially, we can take responsibility. We don't just have to succumb to everything that exists. Books, other people, educational sources. Literally, you can learn money and you can make the decision to not be poor. I'm gonna leave it there because this could go on forever, but I just want us to get to the place of saying that, again, there is resourcefulness.
Thank you, Ms.
sorry.
Newman.
Agree, but that's not where, again, I hear what you're saying, but I want to, and that too is a responsibility, a decision, and a mindset. So let me
Thank you,
leave it
Ms.
there.
Newman. Dr. Harrison-Jones, did you want to say? Oh,
I think what has been shared, I want to go back to our ways of knowing, and that one of the most important, unfortunately successful the factors in where we are today is that we have lost connection with the strategies and the ways that our ancestors have prevailed. And so I want to again lean on the power of remembering. The other piece I want to talk about is pushing back on the toxic narratives of hopelessness. I generally live in the second stanza, Lift Every Voice and Sing, where Johnson talks about a hope unborn has died. And there is an element of that wherein my own heart laments as I move through our community and hear hear and experience the devastating realities of the world. But what I will say is that Thurman talks about all of life is alive. And so I would encourage us not to be so consumed by the news waves. A part of it is detaching from these toxic devices, to be in tuned enough with the algorithms of the earth, to know that there is always a natural resilient spirit, even in the natural order of the universe. Alice Walker says it pisses God off when we walk through fields of purple and do not see them. There is purple all around us, in the laughter of children, in the wisdom of elders. And sometimes we have to create the spaces for these kind of things to happen. And we don't. Now, as thankful as I am as a philanthropist to donors, the wisdom exchanged here is just as good as Big Mama's porch. I was surprised when porch conversations were co-opted from Black folk a few years ago and became something funded by an official foundation. We've been talking across porches for generations. So if we find value in the thing and we know the thing, then we have to create the thing, because there are no supermen or superwomen coming for us. And for me, this has, I won't say less to do with the enemy, but it has more to do in my thinking because I find value in it. And we invest in that which we value. You know, people ask me where my art collection came from. It came because I bought it. You know, nobody died and gave it to me. You know, we invest, build, and value that which we believe in.
Thank you,
And
Dr.
so that's
Henderson.
agency. So all of those things, but remembering agency and disconnecting long enough to see the spirit at work around us and to join the party.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll keep it brief. The thought that came to mind for me is taking moments, being intentional about taking moments to be quiet with ourselves, to think about what is the help that I need. I think, again, we live in a very fast-paced world, as has been mentioned before. We find ways to be distracted. We can be on our phone, all kinds of things pulling us away truly from ourselves. And so when I am intentional about creating those quiet moments for myself and listening to what's in my voice and my spirit and asking myself that question, what is the help that I need? Taking those opportunities to do that, and then listening, taking those next steps. You know, we've got, again, is it the financial help that I need? Do I want to start with a book? Do I want to start with a conversation with people in my community who I know are, you know, have demonstrated financial health? Is it spiritual? Again, do I want to start off with a book or a podcast before I maybe step in to a place of worship? Again, mental health space. You know, I know it can be confusing and scary to think about talking to a mental health provider. There are a lot of lovely podcasts out there that talk about mental health related to Black people. Is that going to be my start? But really asking ourselves that question, getting quiet, and then listening to what comes up.
Thank you, Dr. Henderson. Sis, I'm sorry, we are at the end, but the panel members will be hanging around. So for anyone, if you have questions and you want to speak with anyone on the panel, we will kind of be lingering around for a little bit. I would like to thank our panelists, Dr. Henderson, Dr. Harrison-Jones, Ms. Newman, and Dr. Kazembe. Thank you for your insights and wisdom. To our audience, thank you for your presence and your participation. Our sponsors and the Indiana Landmark for making this event possible. We've done a lot of thank yous today. We have not fully given a full round of applause to Miss Eunice Trotter. Let's give her a full round of applause. Yeah. Please be sure to visit the vendors in the walkway there in the lobby and take a moment to view the art exhibit located in the Rap Gallery downstairs. Thank you all for your presence here. Continue to uplift our communities. Be well.